All right. David, you want to kick us off and say hello to everyone?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ionic Zurich meetup online, which may be actually the first meetup of the year, I think. So, I'm really happy that we have the chance to welcome you, Eli, and everybody, and Mike, and Matt. And I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Yeah, thank you again to David and the rest of Ionic Zurich for hosting us today. We're really excited. Trying out a different format with online Ionic meetups. Check out the Ionic blog for more details on how we're suggesting and kind of promoting those and giving you some more tools, the Ionic community, some more tools for sharing your web development knowledge and learning new things. So we're really excited about that. And as part of that, and kind of the purpose of what we're going to do today is I'm here to talk about Ionic React and roll out a new presentation that we've been building. So let's get right to it. We're going to have a little demo here at the end, and then stick around for some Q&A with Mike Hardington, Eli Lucas, and I at the end about all things Ionic. Drop your questions into the chat on the side now or whenever you want, and we'll pick some to answer at the end. So cool. So this is Ionic React. We're going to learn how to build iOS, Android, desktop, and progressive web apps using React with the Ionic way. So later, of course, once the presentation's over, go to ionicframework.com/react to learn more. All right. So quickly, I am Matt Netco, part of our Ionic developer relations team, and that's you can find my info online there at ionicframework.com. So we're going to be primarily have me talk about the Ionic React today, and then have the other guys from the Ionic team help me out with some Q&A. So thank you. And briefly, before I go into this, I wanted to mention that this presentation that I'm sharing is built with DeckDeck Go, built by Mr. David here himself of Ionic Zurich. So yeah, awesome stuff. So we are using DeckDeck Go for this presentation on React. It is a simple but very powerful progressive web app presentation builder. And much like, of course, Ionic is all about web development and building with web tech. So it seemed like a great fit to roll out this new presentation, right? And so this exact deck is very simple, built on HTML. And my favorite part is we'll see, because it's built with web technology itself, we can do a lot of cool things. So I'm just going to tease that for now, but we can show off a lot of neat things. And it's free and open source, so definitely give it a look-see for your next presentation. All right, so taking a step back. So what is Ionic Framework for those that may be new to us? So you probably, I would say this is what we're most known for, right? It's a cross-platform UI toolkit that helps you build native mobile, desktop, and web apps using web tech. And probably the most really awesome thing that we've seen, we've been around for a little over 5 years now, if not longer than that, and we're now powering over 10% in that short time, powering over 10% of all the apps in the Apple and Google Play Store. So the Ionic approach, also known as hybrid mobile, has really taken off and has really been building momentum over these last few years. In fact, we've been used by over 5 million devs in over 200 countries. So quite just an amazing community that's built up. And my favorite part, of course, biased, but we're backed by a growing company, right? So this is what the making and enabling web developers to build really awesome, powerful apps is the core of what we do. That's entirely our focus. So all of our tools and our platform are built around that, and as with some great results. And specifically, what is Ionic React then? So this is our React flavor of the Ionic framework. So traditionally, Ionic framework was built on Angular, all the way back to Angular 1 or Angular JS, up through Angular 9 and beyond. But this is kind of a new thing for us to be able to deploy the framework and all these great components using React and building them for React developers. So really exciting stuff, because what that brings you is we have over 100 different components such as modals, menus, tabs. You can kind of see a little on the image here, all different types of components that you'd expect to build, especially mobile apps are a heavy focus for us. So with these, excuse me, you can build cross-platform native quality apps with just a single code base, reusing your web development knowledge and specifically your knowledge of React. I am, in particular, I'm actually fairly new to React myself, coming more from the .NET and Angular world. And one of the things I most love about it is that it's just React. There's nothing really custom here. There's not yet another framework, yet another tool to learn, which, we all know can be tiresome and overwhelming. And it's, that whole thing, right? There's always something new to learn. But what's really great about this is we're compatible and built on and, coupled with, as we'll see, the tried and true best in class React libraries and tools. And we partner up with them. So that's kind of the really great thing. It's very, familiar look and feel and feeling that React devs like you expect. And, Ionic React is part of, is actually one slice of an overall platform. So when I mentioned, as I said, we do so much more, and that's our single focus for just, really enabling devs to build killer apps, right? It's an end-to-end platform for building these cross-platform apps. And we've got a bunch of different parts, right? So the framework we just talked about, which is open source, you can build a complete app for free end-to-end using our cross-platform UI toolkit. And then you have Ionic Capacitor, which is our native runtime. So that's a tool that lets you take your web-based code, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it lets you take your web-based code and deploy it to all those different platforms like iOS and Android, and makes that really simple to do. And then there's Ionic Native, which is our premium. We have both open source and premium native solutions and core plugins. So that's the type of capability where if you want to access camera, Bluetooth, geolocation, all those types of hardware device features, you turn to native for that. And that exposes various JavaScript APIs to make it really easy to incorporate those features and functionality into your Ionic apps. And last, we have Ionic App Flow. Not really a topic today, but just briefly, it's our mobile DevOps suite. So of course, when you're part of a team building multiple apps, you're likely going to want to turn to some sort of CI/CD solution. And for us, that means providing the ability to bundle up your apps and deploy them for iOS and Android, really from zero to App Store. So bringing all the automation kind of goodness in our cloud-based mobile DevOps solution there. All right, so let's take a deeper look into React itself and Ionic React specifically. So again, I mentioned there's over 100 plus web components here. So what's really great about that, and brief aside, is we rebuilt with Ionic 4, and now we're up to Ionic 5 and beyond. We've rebuilt Ionic Framework for the last time on top of web component technology, which is basically part of the standard browser features and functionality. And what that allows us to do is bring the framework to Ionic Framework to other frameworks and libraries like React. So really, it's a benefit for us building them and maintaining them, and for you as developers consuming them, because you get all these great features without any headaches or anything that's not part of a browser standard. What they include are some powerful theming, and what we really are bringing here is, and we'll show with this over here, is an embedded app, is the native style navigation and high performance animation. So I'm really excited to show some video and actually show off some of how this works. And as I mentioned with DeckDeck Go and building this as a PWA, this presentation itself, and with Ionic, of course, being built on web tech, this is a real little embedded web app here, which is really cool. So we can dig into and try out a bunch of the different components here. Like here's Action Sheet, and this is running live from the presentation. This is actually Ionic components embedded into the presentation. So I'll just kind of show off a couple of these, but we've got all different types of interactivity, and we can see how that looks in my little iOS iPhone shell here. And of course, everyone's favorite when we talk about theming, it goes beyond just dark mode, but of course we have dark mode support is really, really easy to add. So, check this out. We'll have a link for this later. You can see this demo, which is available in our documentation too. But yeah, really cool stuff here. You can show off all the components. let's dig into one of them in particular and kind of show like what it looks like in the code. You can see on the left versus the code on the right. This is our Ionic Card component. And so as we see here, we're just, rendering a simple list of different Ionic apps that we really love. These are some real ones, for example, like SwearKit or Shipped from Target. And as you can see on the right here, it's really straightforward. We're using typical, casing for your components with React. Again, there's nothing, this is just React code like you're familiar with. And you can kind of see that all the component names are fairly straightforward named for if you're not used to working with our components. What I've always loved is the familiarity and just really just ease of use is fairly apparent when you just look into this. So we're really just, building up a list of each of these little app lists here, and then including things like a thumbnail, the image to the logo over here, you can see is an Ion image, labels for the app name and a description with a paragraph tag. So, nothing again out of the ordinary. We just import, in this case, our Ion card and a couple other components that I've snipped off there, and you're good to go basically. A brief bit about gestures and animations. So that's what really is the power of Ionic React that I love, especially when you're building mobile apps, is, you don't want to have to recreate all of those, the styling, the native specific navigation. So that's what we're seeing over here with our email based video here, email app. You'll notice that some of the headers up top as it transition with the word inbox at the very top, as well as the different navigation UI and how performant that is going back and forth. So you get all of this out of the box with the latest UI designs from Google, with Material Design and iOS as well. Additionally, I just wanted to highlight in the latest version of Ionic 5 is the swipe to close modal, which is really neat there. So this is the stackable modal that if you've been an iOS user for a while, this has been part of iOS 13, I believe, for a while. And again, this is our kind of like a contacts type of app, but we've implemented all this for you. So with just a couple props that you add to your Ion modal component, you can enable this functionality. You would just provide, of course, the contacts data or favorites or whatever your use case is, but the component itself takes care of all that rendering and that animation and those gestures for you. And then, okay, let's dig specifically into some of the details for React that we are unique to Ionic React specifically. Under routing and navigation. So what we've done is we're actually using React Router under the hood. So, I'm kind of newer to the React world, but it's definitely one of the most popular, if not the most popular routing libraries out there. So you'll notice here in my example with a route to a dashboard component or a redirect for, if someone goes to the root of a page back to still that dashboard component, that's just React Router. There's nothing different there. The only real interesting twist we put on this in order to enable those rich page transitions on mobile especially is we just wrap those route components on the Ion React Router component itself. So just a couple of steps there to do that. As you see, it's mostly in the markup versus any type of logic that you have to implement yourself. There's none of that. It's all just wrapping those in those tags, and then you're good to go. You get all those animations out of the box and for the transition between different routes. Testing as well. So we're kind of combining three different best-in-class solutions here. So we use Jest and React testing library and kind of hook those into our apps. We've as a team have worked with those for a long time and have found really good success. So we thought that was kind of the ones to rubber stamp as our favorites. And you'll see basically on the right we've got a list of to-dos that we're mapping out, and with simple Jest test we can basically loop through those to-dos and make sure that they as a simple unit test are rendering out as they expect, and that the values we expect to find are there. So again, nothing too out of the ordinary. The only addition worth mentioning is we made a small wrapper library called Ionic React Testing Utils, and that just helps with testing some of the Ionic React components. Being web components, there were some additional little details. We wanted to make that unit testing and integration testing smoother. So you add that into your project and basically away you go. It's really simple. And Ionic React has first-class support for progressive web apps. Perhaps, shouldn't really be much of a surprise since Ionic is all about web development. That's the core of what we do. We make sure that we have a great experience for that out of the box with a pre-configured service worker ready to go. And of course, there's easy deployment. I won't be deploying something today, but I'll show kind of how to build an app and serve it locally and make some changes to it. But with part of our Ionic CLI, you're able to just run really just one command, the Ionic build command, to deploy it for production or locally, of course. And then you can integrate with something like the Now service for static site hosting or Netlify. Tons of options there because it's just really building a static app here on your local machine. I'm going to take a pause here for a second. Cool. And then, I kind of touched on this at the beginning for some of the native access is done via Capacitor. So this is a project we've had around for a couple of years now. And we just launched version 2.0 just a few weeks ago, which is really exciting. But this is our native runtime tool that allows you to take your Ionic React app, your web app, and deploy it to iOS, Android, and beyond, right? And so what we're kind of doing there is a lot of it is tooling based, just CLI implementations. But we also have what we're doing, because again, we're all about web standards and things like that, is we have a bunch of core plugins, one of which I'll show off in just a second. Core plugins like local notifications, the camera, that are based on web standard APIs. And what that gives us is the ability to use, as we see in our code sample on the right, the same code and run that everywhere. So in this example, I'm importing the camera and local notifications. And what I'm saying is, let's implement a take picture function where we say, okay, let's open with the get photo function. We'll open the camera on the user's device and then set the path to display it, whatever photo has been captured. And then let's send a little local notification on the bottom of our computer, if it's a desktop, or on, of course, iOS and Android, that'd be your traditional notification bubble, right? Where like, okay, let's say we've got a new photo we just captured. Here's the link to it. Here's the details. And one thing to really call out here is you'll notice that there's nothing, iOS specific, web specific, like if running on the web, run this code. If running on Android, do that, right? It's just all abstracted away from you and provides simple APIs to implement with these, integrate with these native features, right? So that's one of my favorite things is, you don't end up with a messy project or having to, debug different issues because of platform specific details. It's all tightly integrated and, it really works nicely for, regardless of what framework you're using. But of course, React works well. We like to call this, another key mantra of Capacitor is the code once, configure everywhere idea. What we're doing here in this kind of new way of looking things is actually embracing the native tools and IDEs. So that'd be Xcode for iOS and Android Studio for Android, right? And the thought there is basically, rather than create, again, adding more cognitive overload for you as developers using it with different things to keep up to date that could break easily, right? If we build custom tooling around it, let's, use what these platforms give us. So really what we end up doing is building our application and then going into syncing it with our native projects, iOS, Android, etc., and then hitting the play button, connecting the device and pressing play. That's it really to test that locally. And, so check that out at capacitor.ionicframework.com. And, we've kind of built on a lot of the inspiration and design decisions and lessons learned over the years from Cordova, React Native, TurboLinks, all these different projects. So definitely recommend you check that out. And I'll kind of show a little demo of this in just a moment. And probably, one question we get a lot is, well, you're building this Ionic React, and how does that fit in with React Native, or how does Capacitor back over here, you know, work with it, against it? What's the situation there, right? And you know, React Native is a really great tool. It in a similar goal of Capacitor for us, allows you to take your React skills and use them to build native iOS and Android apps, right? The kind of core difference with Capacitor and the Ionic platform in this case is we're built on, because you're building a PWA out of the box and built on web tech. It just gives you a little bit more options for deployment, right? You can use the same code for your desktop app or site and then deploy that to mobile, all using the same code base. And we're using, of course, as I mentioned with some of the details of the Capacitor, we're built on web standards and therefore the React DOM. So, you know, we get first-class PWA support out of the box. With React Native, I guess you're kind of trying there's React Native Web that kind of enables that as well. But this is you know, which definitely works. But I think this is for those that are used to building within the browser and the browser's dev tools and React's tools, you get that support right out of the box. And additionally, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, Ionic and the platform here is all that we do as a company. So we offer, you know, not only is that I think a really great benefit of having one sole focus, but we also have for teams building, you know, serious apps and you know, even up to tens, hundreds of apps a year, we've got official enterprise support. So you have someone to call, you have someone to reach out to if you run into issues or need assistance or training, all those types of things. So that's kind of a neat way that we kind of stand out there. Cool. So that's pretty much Ionic React in a nutshell. I'm going to do a quick little demo here, but it's really easy to get started. So we have two options. You have our CLI, which is really easy to get started, npm install it as you would any other tool, and then run Ionic start and either select the React type, or you can specify it there pretty easily. Or we have a new tool called an app wizard, which I'm going to show off now to kind of bootstrap this. Just a little bit, it's just a web-based tool that lets us start an app, and we actually end up coming back to the CLI and VS Code and everything too. So I'm going to show this off here and kind of integrate. I'm going to start an Ionic React app and then integrate Capacitor's local notifications as just a little simple demo here. So let's try that. Let's call it Cap Loco Notes. We can pick an icon. Let's see. I'm a fan of the smiley face. We'll make it a red icon. Let's see, start with the tabs. And then of course I'll pick React. And so this generates the app on the back end for us and gives us, besides of course installing Ionic, if I already had an Ionic account, we can create that or not if you want. It gives us one easy command to download and bootstrap the app with all those different settings applied. So let's kind of take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so I'm in a temp folder here. I'm going to paste that and let it run. And we'll kind of talk through what's happening. So this is, again, we chose this tab starter, so that's already grabbed that for us. And then what's really nice and what I love about this bootstrap process is we really make it easy if you're interested in, especially if you're new to the Ionic world, we try to make the startup process as seamless as possible. So you'll see that it's prompted me to integrate with Capacitor, so I'm going to say yes for that. So that'll install, as you see, Capacitor Core, which is those web standards-based APIs that offer like the camera, local notifications that work across the web, iOS and Android really nicely. So that's going to install all of that. As well as it'll give us, Capacitor has its own CLI, very light, kind of tool that gets added per project. It doesn't pollute the global namespace. So that's really nice for versioning your project, and you might be on different versions of Capacitor. Everything is integrated in within your project there. So that's gonna install there, and I'm gonna pull up a second. Probably see that. Okay. Okay. And again, as that's installing, leave your questions in the Zoom chat here on YouTube on the chat sidebar. And just a bit here, Mike, Eli, and I are going to answer some questions about React or anything with Ionic. So please do. Should just take another second. What I'm going to integrate is the local, while that's installing, the local notifications API. So as you might imagine, we've got push notifications, we've got local notifications, camera support, interacting with the file system. We've got a bunch of tutorials with those types of things. But this is kind of really cool. It's a neat way to show something, integrated and visible. I'm going to move that over here. And great. Okay, so we've created our Cap local notes app here. I'm going to switch on over to that. I had the other one open. Sweet. Get my terminal up for that. Okay. Cool. Okay. So what I want to do, I'm going to point out a couple of things. So if we look here on the left, again, we're using really, I think the only other difference to mention is we're really big fans of TypeScript over at Ionic. So not something that you're required to use, but all of our starter projects integrate that out of the box. But everything else, otherwise is a page or a component. And this is our tab starter app. So this gives us kind of some bootstrapped, routing and different, in this case, it's 3 different tabs ready to go. So I'm going to actually build and deploy this locally so we can make some changes and see them live in the browser and the IDE with the VS Code. So I'm going to run Ionic Serve. So what this will do is build and run our project over localhost. And you'll notice here we're using React scripts. So again, as I kind of mentioned and hinted at, we're big fans these days of using, recognizing and using the right tool for the job. So whether that's your native IDE for the Capacitor side and building for mobile, or in this case with React, it's important to point out that this is just, Bootstrap with Create React app, as well as React scripts for some of all the dynamic features like running this locally. So, what I love about that, again, as someone that's newer to React, is there's nothing, this is all standard React ecosystem type tools and functionality. So I've really enjoyed, using that. So I'm going to grab this over here. All right. I think we'll collapse this. And so here we go. We've got the app running on the side here. Fairly simple, but here's our tab starter working out of the box. You can switch between each tab. And what I want to do is kind of just point out a few things and integrate one of the Capacitor plugins. I think that'll be kind of cool. So I'm on tab 1, TSX. Again, very straightforward with TypeScript. We just get, type definitions and a little bit of help there, but otherwise it's your typical functional React type of app here. Let's see. So I'm going to, let's start by, well, actually I wanted to point out a couple of things again, with the components themselves. So again, one of the things we really try to do well is work with you as a developer in terms of making, again, the tooling familiar, or in this case, the development experience. So you'll notice that all of the components, the casing is familiar to you. It's not anything unique or custom there. It's all the React way, as well as the rest of everything about the code itself here. So that's one of the things I really love. But I'm going to, all right, let's integrate the local notifications here. So I'm going to import my plugins from Capacitor, which is under the core library. Okay. And then within my component here, I'm going to access the local notifications plugin notifications directly from plugins. So we'll save that. Okay, save that and it gets organized. And there's only a couple more things to do to actually integrate this. So one thing what I want is just kind of a little friendly message to kind of welcome everyone from Ionic Zurich here and now beyond in the world. We'll do some little notifications. So I need to use the request permission action. Actually, I think I can just await it. local notifications dot request permission. So this is, of course, when you've gone to a site that wants to use notifications, things like that, is the little bubble that will, pop up that says allow or deny. So we need to do that. And let's see, I think we just need to make this async, perhaps. Oh, no, that's right. I'm going to make a function for that. Let's see. We'll call it say hello. And let's see, we want to make a new function. We'll pull this in here and then pull it in there. All right, make it async. So first we want to, define a new function, then we'll make a little button down below and call that. But let's just finish implementing that. So really simple. There's really just a schedule function we can call. So let me pull that in. All right. We don't even need to name it here. We can just call local notifications.schedule, and I'll just take out some of the sound and other things for now. But basically we can schedule as many notifications as we want. It takes an array of notifications. We can say, hello, Ionic Zurich, Ionic React rocks. And the schedule prop here just tells us when to fire it, right? So we can say, like, let's do it 3 seconds from now. So 3 seconds from now. And that's about it. We just need to trigger that somehow. So when you're building an Ionic React app, you have your header and you have your main content. The content is typically where you're putting, as you can imagine, all your content, other components. And so that's where we'll throw that in over here. Let's just add in an Ion button, which again, can be, is fairly straightforward with the casing and everything. I can just auto import that here. And again, looking up at the import statement, you just import it from Ionic React and you're good to go pretty much. So we want to do on click, and I believe the syntax is like that. And what did I call that? I called it say hello. Sweet. So we'll save that. Okay. Oh, and of course I didn't provide a name, so we can say, a Zurich meetup. Probably put a label on a button, right? Not have it all squished. So theoretically, if I click this, this should pop up with a notification. Maybe not. Maybe it's blocked. Let's see. Nope. Okay.
Hey, Matt, you need to call your say hello function.
There, like that?
Yep.
There we go. Eli for the win. Thank you, sir. Oh, all right, sweet. So I think, when I was testing this, I had already allowed local notifications to local hosts, so that's why it didn't prompt me. But there we go. There's my notification. So pretty cool. All right. Let's go back to the app. So basically, that's kind of a quick, very brief tour of an Ionic React app integrating Capacitor. Fairly straightforward there, in one of the APIs. And again, if we were to deploy this to iOS or Android, we wouldn't have to write specific code to detect that, for that each platform. It just works out of the box, with, of course, slight differences per native platform. So that's all taken care of for you. Cool. Let's go back to our app. And all right, so that's kind of at a high level there, our presentation. Let me pause that. And now we'll switch to some Q&A. So let's see, do we have anything? Let's start over with Zoom. Cool. And I should say, let's have the Mike and Eli join us back here. Are you guys able to turn your cameras back on?
No, I am not. I need you to do that for me.
Zoom.
Presentation. It's like software. It's like it's supposed to be easy these days, but I'm
Exactly.
finding out it is not.
Rachel, are you able to get? Oh,
There
there
it
we go.
is.
All right.
I am the host.
Sweet. And then maybe Eli as well. Should we let Eli in?
I am in your stream causing chaos. I can't start my video though.
Now you can.
Yeah, give it a shot.
No.
There he is. Awesome. Woohoo. Sweet. All right. Oh, good question from Greg. He's asking us if Ionic has a recommendation for state management in Ionic React. Maybe one of you guys can take that one.
I'll take it. So, I mean, just because it's just React, right? And so you're free to use whatever state management system that you want to use, whether it be like Redux or MobX or just plain old context with sharing state session across all of your components. It's just React. So no, we really don't have a recommended one, but whatever one that you know and love, you can go ahead and get started with it and be productive with it right away because, you know, again, it's just React.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to add on to that, there are some pretty nice alternatives that are based on React context now. I think React Use Hook or Use Store is the name of it, which is a similar API to Redux or React Redux. Much simpler kind of approach. Does less and has less integration with things like dev tools and whatnot. But if you just need like keep track of something like how many times has this user clicked a button, or what is the current, I don't know, what's the current object inside of this component, that could be something that you could check out.
Nice.
That is answering that live.
Sweet. Jonathan wants to know if the code is available on GitHub. Would be nice to test it, but I can't keep up with typing. Yeah, that makes sense. I was going a little fast there. So yeah, so a couple of things. This presentation itself is available online. We'll give a link out to that. That's in our new, yeah, we can add a link to that. The presentation itself, along with the notifications example I just showed from the starter, we'll link to that in a second on the to the Capacitor docs there. But yes, all available. Let's see. So thank you, Jonathan. I will drop you some links. Oh, so someone asked when we should use local notifications instead of Firebase FCM. So why don't one of the other guys take this one?
When to use local notification instead of FCM. So I think there is a clear difference, right? FCM expects you to have some kind of notification that is going to happen from external to the app. Local notifications tend to mean that there is something happening inside the app that is contained by the app. So a local notification could just mean, hey, you completed a task or something else happened, like something internal to that app that has no effect from the outside world. That's when you use local notifications. When you want to use things like push notifications, or in this case, Firebase Cloud messaging, that typically means that you have something going on that, or you have some information that is external from the app that you want to present to the user. So kind of think of it, anytime anything external happens and you need to notify the users of your app, use FCM. When you have things happening inside the app and you want to notify your users, use local notifications.
Exactly. Let's see. Oh, so Luca's asking about swipe back features on Ion React routers that implemented in Ionic React. I believe it is, but Mike or Eli, you could probably speak more to that than I could.
I think maybe Luke is referring to swipe to go back, and that should be working by default, like on iOS. So
I actually have it currently it's enabled, but it's not like a one-to-one gesture drag. It's just if you swipe, it'll do the push to go back, but it doesn't actually follow the view that you're swiping. So I think there's a bug report for it. If not, please open an issue for it and we can take a look. So I get a few questions here from YouTube that I want to get answered before we jump on to more Zoom ones. What's the performance difference between Angular and React with Ionic? Who wants to answer this one?
I'm going to go with Eli. Specific differences, you guys would probably be able to answer better than me.
I would say typically there's not going to be much of a performance difference between the either Ionic Angular or Ionic React. Underneath the covers, both of them are using our standard web components, which are really performant inside of modern browsers that natively support web components. So I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of really like performance differences or anything like that. I don't know if we've ever done any type of specific comparisons between the two frameworks to show it, but I think if we did, it's going to be very marginal between the two.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, the performance bottlenecks are never the components or the framework. It tends to be code that you are either consuming from third-party libraries or potentially code that you are writing yourself. So always be sure to check what is the performance what are the performance impacts of your own code versus framework that you're using.
Yep. Sweet. All right, Mike, you want to keep running through the YouTube ones? We got a lot of great questions. Keep them coming, everyone. This is awesome.
Yeah.
This is great.
This is a very existential one. This is one where we should have brought Max in. How do you define the future of Ionic? And I don't know. This is a real tough one. Eli, how did you define the future of Ionic?
Well, I think our main mission is to enable web developers to be productive writing web or applications in general, right? And so we've always had a really tight focus around specifically mobile applications. But in the future, we could probably be looking at expanding outside of just, being native inside of an iOS device or an Android device. And so one of our big focuses is PWA support. And so having Ionic be just like, a really great first-class application platform for writing progressive web apps. Beyond that, we're really starting to dig deep into making Ionic a great framework for desktop applications as well. So you can choose Ionic for your desktop apps. We've done a lot of work so far to make it a lot better, but we know we still have a ways to go for desktop support, but keep an eye out for that as well. And besides that, outside of the framework, like Ionic as a company just has lots of things going on to really accelerate application development for developers and enterprises specifically. So if you're an enterprise, look out for some pretty exciting stuff that's coming out for us as well.
That kind of leads us up to the next question. Is Ionic React stable and already in a good enough place to be used for enterprise applications?
I would say absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we already have a few people that are on our list who we have conversations with that are using Ionic React right now. So
And so just to clarify the release status for Ionic
Yeah.
React, it's not in beta or anything like that right now. It's in full release on Ionic 5. So yeah, it's ready to rock and roll.
So this could be a good one for Netco. In new projects, should I start using Capacitor right now, or can I use Cordova?
That's a great question, Mike. Yes, so we would recommend Capacitor. Of course, it's a project that we built ourselves, and of course, as a result, integrates really nicely with the rest of the whole platform, from the framework to app flow and beyond. But you know, the real reason why is we love and still support Cordova and all the plugins that come with that, right? There's 10 plus years of history there and native functionality, and that takes time to rebuild and bring everyone over, right? So what's really great about Capacitor is it's backward compatible with 99% of Cordova plugins, and the migration process is really smooth. I've migrated a couple apps myself, so we'll drop a link into the little chat here, but definitely get started. So you get all in all, like, summary is an improved and more modern development experience and tooling, with really no drawback because you can use the same plugins and port your app over. So I really always suggest everyone, give it a try, start a new branch and add Capacitor, much like I did in the little demo, and see if it works out for you. I'm we're pretty confident these days that it should. So yeah.
So that answers your question, Luca, inside the Q&A panel. It was like, can we use Cordova plugins with Capacitor? Yes, you can. There's a explicit list also of plugins that are not supported inside of Capacitor due to various reasons, but all the core ones and plugins that you get from like a default Cordova project that are maintained by the Cordova team, yeah, those will work in our stuff.
Yep. And most of those too, Mike, are a lot of them aren't supported in the sense of you just don't need them anymore because Capacitor has them built in, or just the tech's a little bit different, so they're just not really required anymore. So
yeah. This is another Capacitor one. Will Capacitor have the same amount of plugins as Cordova in the future? And I think so there's two ways to answer this, right? There's Cordova has a bunch of plugins that can be used from various plugin authors in the community, and you can just add them to your project. We have a lot of core plugins that we've maintained and we created, as well as a growing number of community plugins that we want to figure out a way to grow, promote, and help maintain and share that burden. So, I would expect to see the number of community plugins and plugins that you could add to your project that are not from us directly. I would expect to see that number grow in the future. Takes time to build up the community for that, and to encourage people to attempt to build some plugins.
Yep, I'd agree there, Mike. Like any kind of project like this, it takes time to build up different plugins, but we're seeing more and more rolled out all the time, especially from the community. And we're hiring more and more native devs now to help support and backfill those types of things. So yeah, stay tuned for more on that front. It's really exciting. We're putting a lot of work into the whole platform, especially React and Capacitor, and Angular, of course, too.
So this is probably going to be a question for all of us. Which platform or framework do you prefer to build apps with? Ionic with Angular or Ionic with React? Don't all jump at once.
I'll start. I love both frameworks. And so usually like if I'm going to start like an app for like a side project or playing around with something, I will typically choose whatever I'm not using mostly in my day-to-day type work. And that's so I can try to stay up to date with both of them. And so I'm lately, I've been primarily focused on Ionic React. And so if I start something, I'll probably start it in Ionic Angular. But then at the same time, like I know like I've started like a couple of side projects in Ionic React as well, just so I can like use the stuff that I'm actually working on. So it doesn't necessarily come down to a preference of which one do I like better. It's I want to stay knowledgeable about what's going on in both ecosystems. And so I tend to see myself going back and forth between the two when working with them.
Nice. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I go ahead, Mike.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, for me, as I mentioned, I'm kind of still newer to React. So that's kind of my, what I'm kind of digging into more these days. But again, I think, it depends on, it's more about the right tool for the job, meaning what does your team look like? Are you looking to learn something new? Do you need to ship something quickly? Of course, with that, build with what you know. One thing I will notice as someone that's kind of, going back and forth between Angular and React specifically lately is I do just love, again, because these are the Ionic framework components are just web components. We saw some of the camel casing and other syntax is a little different, obviously moving between the two, but the components don't, and the properties and all your access stuff doesn't change. So moving from Angular to React in this case, I'm, just as proficient on the Ionic side of things and building an app as I was with Angular, because it's all mostly the same. So that's immensely powerful, especially if you're kind of, want to dip your toes into either of those worlds. So, yeah. How about you, Mike?
I prefer Angular. It's pretty simple. I don't know. I'd like to build the app and not spend the various times digging through various plugins and packages that I could be used to build the app. I'd rather not bike shed, and I'd rather just build an app.
Mm-hmm. That's a good response. Actually, how about David, if you don't mind, what's your favorite these days? Put you on the spot for a second. Because I know, just a quick note, everyone, like David knows, oh my gosh, a lot. He is a prolific blogger and, web dev. So like, I don't know. I'm curious, what do you think?
I'm a bit agree with Eli, because I'm the same. Like currently I work for a client and I mostly do Angular. So I'm happy on the side to do something else so I stay up to date. But I will answer that probably my favorite version is the one with stencil. So yeah.
David, why you
It's
gotta
probably because I do
the wild card.
But yeah, I think that they are all cool, because that's the things I like about Ionic is it doesn't matter at the end, because then my UI, my UI design, the component from Ionic are always the same. So you can easily switch between React, Angular, Stencil, whatever, because the front end, the components works always the same. So that's really
you could throw all of them out the window and just go straight up static HTML if you need to.
Yeah.
There's one question someone put in YouTube regarding video capture plugin. What is a suggested plugin if you want to just capture video in an app? NECA seems like a
yeah.
question.
That's a good question. We don't have something like that in the core plugin suite today. There might be something. We can take a look at our community page really quick, but that would be something where generally I would say, Mike or Eli, we'd request someone to open up an issue in the Capacitor repo for a feature request. Because we always want to hear from the community what what you're really needing, especially from a native perspective. So I would say if it's not something that we have today, we can always investigate it.
Yeah.
We do have a community plugins list. I'll actually drop that in here. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interesting to know the use cases for it. Like, is it screen capture on a mobile device or screen capture on a desktop device? I'm not too sure about the capabilities of the web media capture API, but that might be one thing to look into. You might be able to, like, at least from within a web browser, capture what's going on without using any type of plugins. But if a plugin's not available, there's always the opportunity to write custom code via Capacitor, custom native code that you can call in and do it. So it's kind of like writing your own plugin, but the bridge that Capacitor gives you to bridge your web code with native code is really slick.
Yeah, it's much simpler than what existed in Cordova. Which, funny enough, there's a question about that. Why does Ionic have a problem with Cordova now? I don't think I wouldn't describe it as we have a problem with it. No, we kind of built Capacitor to fit our own needs. We wanted to do things a little bit differently. We wanted to experiment more, and at least have the opportunity to try different approaches that might not make sense in Cordova. We also wanted to move really, really fast. Like Cordova right now itself is part of Apache, and Apache's release process, exists for a reason, but it can be pretty slow. So Capacitor is just our wish list of if we had the chance to do whatever we wanted to, what would that look like, and how could we do it so that it doesn't break what users expect, like the user experience, but is a little bit more stable and causes less hiccups during the development process. So,
Yeah, I would agree.
that answers your question. Let's see. Ooh, from Greg. As the Vue.js implementation comes out of beta during. Okay, as the Vue.js implementation is tied to Vue.js coming out of support. How tightly is Ionic React tied to the current release of React.js? So, because Ionic Vue is tied to Vue actually shipping, how coupled are we with our current version of React or the current release cycle for React UI?
So when you start off a new Ionic React project, it installs the latest version of React into the project. And so whatever version 16 whatever we're up to right now, 13, 14, 15, whatever we're at. As of now, like, we're totally up to date with what's going on in the React ecosystem. Now there's lots of stuff coming out in React 17, like concurrent mode and suspense and all those kinds of fun things that we are looking into to see like what we need to do to be able to take deeper support for it. It should work just right out of the box, but because right now that's all like in developmental, experimental mode. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend using those types of features with Ionic React. But, to answer your question, like right now it's up to date.
Yeah. Sweet. Maybe a couple more questions, guys. We can kind of wrap up. So another good question from Greg asking about, more documentation around Ionic React and with examples and tutorials. So yes, of course, our historically we've been built on Angular, and so and all of that, all the great technology from them, and so our docs reflect that still in a lot of ways. We are currently working on that. We do have a sample app tutorial that you can go from 0 to a capacitor-based photo gallery app, as well as everything that was covered with like React testing and navigation. All of that is in the docs today. And we're continuing to evolve some of the infrastructure of the docs to support other frameworks like React and Vue. So some of that is taking a bit of time, but we'll get there. But we are, continuing to work with community leaders and others to provide more examples. So yes, that's definitely been a big focus for us this year. So look for more of that. Cool.
Question from Michael. Are there any plans on the roadmap for building apps for wearables? So things like Apple Watch, Google, Android Wear, Samsung Wear, what have you?
Mm-hmm. I would say via Capacitor, it's totally open game, and specifically compared to Cordova, Capacitor actually makes that process a lot easier, because when you use Capacitor and you use it to flesh out your native applications, those are assets that don't get regenerated. And so with an iOS app, like you actually put like a watch app inside of the iOS app, and with Cordova that would like to blow away the project all the time and recreate it, that became kind of hard. Like you always had to like re-import it into your project or whatnot. So while we don't have like anything specific in the framework for writing watch apps, like watch apps already, like there's like no web view inside of a watch app, right? So you're not going to use Ionic components to create those types of views, but you could go inside of the native app and create a watch app, and then use the Capacitor bridges to communicate back to your web-based Ionic app.
Yeah, and not to put him on the spot, I think Liam had hacked a little something together, at least for iOS, that I should ping him again and see if he wants to open source that little project. Cool. I think we'll cut it there for questions. We got a bunch that came in from YouTube. We got some good ones coming in from Zoom. So let's call it there.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you David and Ionic Zurich for hosting us in our first online Ionic meetup. If this is something that you're interested in, kind of spreading the word about Ionic, we've got a bunch of new presentations like the one I've talked about today for Ionic React, and those on Capacitor and Ionic and everything. They're a really great way to really learn more about Ionic and spread the word to your friends and coworkers, improve your web development skills, because of course if the more you teach something, the more you're going to know it. So I'll drop a link to that blog post in. So nowadays with everyone being, all of us stuck indoors, hopefully everyone's staying safe and healthy. It's never been a better time to start looking into these kind of things and hosting meetups with your friends and coworkers, everyone's stuck inside. So cool. Thank you all for joining Mike, Eli, and I, and Ashton and David. We will see you next time. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.